What's going on, YouTube? It's Matty O, and holy hell, am I excited to show you what I just picked up. Check it out. This is a 2003 Infiniti G35 Sport, and I scored it for a song and a dance. It says you probably saw in the thumbnail, I paid $3,700 for this, and for me, it was a no-brainer. This car was owned by an elderly gentleman. His son inherited this car, no longer had any interest in keeping it, and decided to list it for sale. I was fortunate enough to be driving by the same day he had listed this thing for sale. He put it out in his front yard. Went to go check it out. He had it listed for $3,999. Proceeded to look inside the window, where I noticed a 6-speed manual transmission shifter sticking right up through the center console. And that was it. Hook, line, and sinker for me. If you're not into these cars, you might not realize that they are getting extremely hard to find in a clean and unmolested condition, and that's exactly what this example is. It's clean, unmolested, aside from a few scratches and dings on the body. I would give it an 8 out of 10. The paint is in amazing condition. It looks like it was garage kept for most of its life. The only downside with this car is the mileage. It's got 199,000 miles on it. I think that would turn most people off, and I think that's why this car was listed for as cheap as it was. Now I'll give you a minute to go do a search for a clean example of a G35. I'm talking one that's not clapped out, hasn't been modified, hasn't had silly things done to the body to rice it out or anything like that. I know in my efforts to search for a similar example of a car, thank you Thunder, thank you for interjecting. I'm gonna just wait. It's going that way. I know in my a clean example would go for maybe $9,000 and up. These cars have been heavily impacted by the drift tax, where they went down in value. A lot of people interested in motorsports and whatnot, modifying vehicles, bought them at that time, and we are now left with very few clean, unmodified examples of them. And I was stoked to find one right in town here. This is a Southern car. It's got no rust on it. One thing when I wanted to check it out was make sure that the mileage was not going to be an issue for me, that this car was not going to be in need of an engine rebuild or major service. And there were a few things that really put my mind to ease. If you're looking at a higher mileage example of a car, you can look to these things to maybe put your mind at rest, because I'm of the opinion mileage doesn't tell the whole story. I personally put a lot of miles on my vehicles. I keep them well maintained, and I know that the rule of thumb everyone has that 100,000 miles is it for a car is completely bogus and unfounded, and is a very wasteful mindset when it comes to enjoying and maintaining a vehicle for a long period of time. It's unnecessary to think that way, but it can indicate a vehicle with advanced wear on it. So I checked it out pretty well, and there were a few really key pieces of information that put me at ease with it. This car came with all the records for oil changes. That was something that told me whoever owned it took very good care of it, was on top of maintenance, and that's the best thing you can do for any vehicle, any motor, to keep it running for a long time. Change oil. Simple, but not everyone understands that. Another comforting factor was that this car comes with the owner's manual. Now that doesn't sound like much, but when you're looking at a used vehicle, that can be a good indication that whoever owned the vehicle had the wherewithal to keep that and protect it. It didn't come out of the vehicle and get lost. I know I've bought vehicles in the past that don't have the owner's manual, and they are usually on the beat up side of things. I'm looking at my Ford F-250 over there. I don't know where that owner's manual is, and I'll never know. But finally, aside from the clean aesthetic inside and outside, the inside has some normal wear and tear for the vehicle's age. It's 21 years old. This car could go out and buy a beer on its own. But I looked in the trunk, and the spare tire, this is when cars still came with spare tires from the factory. The spare tire, jack, all of that stuff is still back in the trunk where it belongs. And here again, that indicates that this car was owned by somebody who took took care of things. So the 200,000 miles that are approaching on this car did not turn me off in the slightest. But I'm gonna pop the hood for you. I'm gonna show you inside. You'll see how clean this car is. But that being said, I got it home and I found some issues with it, so stay tuned, we'll go through it. So as we step inside, you can see this is probably about the worst of the body condition. There's a good scratch there. It looks like we do have some rust starting, so I will be addressing that.
Some brown rust coloration.
These adhesive body stickers at the wheels, fender protectors there, they are cracked, but this is pretty typical of these stickers and they can be replaced. That's not actually in the paint or the body panel itself. But going inside, we've got the tan interior. Now that's not my first choice, but it's really not terrible. This is probably the worst of the interior wear, and this is to be expected. Actually, all things considered, these seats are in pretty good shape. The steering wheel, we've got some wear on that, and that's something I'll probably just throw a steering wheel cover on and be done with. So I'm gonna start this up. The motor sounds healthy. It's so nice to hear a stock VQDE without an obnoxious exhaust. They really had a unique sound from the factory, and this is something that I can appreciate. The goal with this car, I want to make it a daily driver, like my ultimate daily driver. So I'm going to be doing some things to fix some of the issues we have, new tires, etc. You can see the odometer there. We've got our miles on it. The engine revs freely, nicely. There's no timing chain noise or anything of that nature. Now, when I was checking this car out, the person selling the car advised me the air conditioner does not work, and that is true. The head unit here is not functioning at all. In addition to that, the radio is also not functioning. I did some research, and apparently this whole setup, they share some circuitry that is kind of a known issue to go bad. So that is something I plan on fixing, and stay tuned. We'll go through getting that sorted out. Over here, we had the original owner's manual, which I took out, but it's still in the somewhat aged Infiniti binder. But that was a very nice find and set my mind at ease. We also had some leather wipes, BMW leather wipes, and of course I have some of the oil change receipts here. And the glove box, everything is to be expected there. Another issue we have, the door locks, the actuator are going bad. That one doesn't work at all, and the driver's side is kind of intermittent. So we will be repairing the door locks. I've got a 2004 350Z as well, and the window motors are problematic. I think that will be something that I also end up replacing probably sooner rather than later. But as of now, we're gonna rock and roll with those. Aside from that though, the other issue I found once I got it home was that when I was sitting here idling the vehicle after driving it for a little bit, I noticed my temperature gauge was starting to creep up. So I think we have an issue with the fans. We'll go through and diagnose that here shortly. I'm gonna move on to the engine bay. I can't tell you how much I appreciate a completely stock and unmodified engine bay. And not only that, an engine bay that is so extraordinarily clean for a vehicle this old and with this much mileage. I mean, you could practically eat a meal off of anywhere inside this engine bay. Now, I will go through and check my hoses, and as you can see, it looks like we have a little bit of a coolant leak there. I'm going to investigate that, but I think it's coming from my overflow tube, and it might have something to do with the temperatures increasing due to lack of cooling fans. So we'll check that out. But another thing I noticed when I was checking this car out is the distinct smell of oil burning on the exhaust manifolds, and that is very characteristic of VQ engines. The valve covers and the gaskets are prone to warping and leaking, so I do plan on getting a set of aluminum valve covers and new gaskets and completely redoing that to stop the leak. And you can easily see there is some oil dripping off the top of the heads there, and it works its way onto the manifold and burns off, which otherwise is the only real indication of nastiness I see under here. We got a little wear on this boot too, like right there. That is something we'll want to fix. We don't want unmetered air getting into the engine, so I'll get a new one of these. I don't really plan on doing any kind of engine mods or air intakes or exhaust. I want to keep this thing stock for as long as I can. I build VQs, I turbocharge them, I've supercharged them. It's going to be hard for me to not do that with this vehicle, but I've got my 350Z and it runs like a... So the desire to play around with this one is low and minimal. I even have the factory battery cover for this side. It's in the trunk. As you can see, missing the Infiniti logo. I'll have to track one of those down. Overall, it's like a 9 out of 10 under the hood. It's really clean, practically showroom quality there, with a couple exceptions. Good stuff. Another issue, the tires had good tread on them, but if you look carefully, you'll see that they have a pretty fair amount of dry rot. So I do plan to replace those. I'll go pop the trunk here. I think somebody did debadge it because I'm pretty sure these said G35 from the factory. Here's my factory battery cover. Most people would have thrown that out or lost it. But as I was mentioning, we have a spare tire in there, our floor jack, our lug wrench. That is really cool to have that. And there is a heavy gauge wire in there, so maybe somebody had a system in this car at one point. From what I can tell, there's very little evidence of that, so if someone did have a sound system in here, they did a pretty good job of removing it and not making an obnoxious mess under the hood or through the firewall. All right, YouTube, it's your turn. I want to hear from you. How do you think I did on this? Is it a good price? Or do you think I am stepping into a bear trap with some kind of high mileage vehicle? Honestly, I think only time will tell. But let me tell you right now the roadmap. And you can stay tuned, watch me take care of a couple issues this car has, and we'll see if it's the real deal here. On the menu for things to fix, I'm going to be diagnosing the radiator fans first and foremost. We don't want an issue where the vehicle is overheating. I also want to get this car up in the air, do an oil change on it, and take a look at under the car. Let's see if the underside of this vehicle is consistent with what we can see from above ground. I did mention I'll be getting some tires on here, so those are just a few of the things on the horizon for this vehicle. I'm going to keep track of how much I spend getting this thing roadworthy so we can actually make an assessment down the road if it was a good investment or not. And that being said, there's people out there paying $600 a month for like a brand new Kia. So when you look at something like this, I feel like I got a good deal. I feel like I didn't beat the seller up too much. There are some issues with the car. I don't think it's anything that with a little bit of knowledge and know-how can't be fixed by myself. Even if you come in with less experience, they're really not that hard to work on. And from an enthusiast standpoint, these vehicles are a lot of fun to drive. For a daily driver geared towards someone who actually enjoys driving, it's hard to beat. You got a 6-speed row your own transmission. You got a car with sports car-like characteristics. You've got the 2 back seats if you gotta get some people in there, most likely children or small people, but 2 extra seats nonetheless. I know my dog can ride with me back there. There's a lot of cool things about this car. Sunroof, we'll get the radio and the AC going, and we are still probably gonna be under the $9,000 mark for like lower mileage example, which may still have a lot of the issues that this car has. So stay tuned with me, folks. If you are into wrenching on cars, if you like the G or Z vehicles from Nissan/Infiniti, we're going to be diving in a lot more with these vehicles, especially now that I've got 2 of them. I'm going to make some more content related to that. So I thank you all for watching. Tell me what you think. Like, subscribe, do me all that stuff. And until next time, Matty-O. is out. Oh, my leg hurts. Another storm is coming.